Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move. This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choices Not Chances. And just like every other episode, if you take something away from this episode, something strikes you, touches you, moves you, share it out to the rest of your community, share it to your sphere of influence, and we'll get stronger together. Today my guest is Luke Sherman. He's a 30-year veteran of the Tulsa Police Department and currently serves as a Senior Vice President of Outreach for Folds of Honor, leading in first responder programs. Folds of Honor is a nonprofit organization that provides educational scholarships to spouses and children of military and first responders who have fallen or been disabled. Since its inception in 2007, Folds of Honor has awarded nearly 44,000 scholarships valued at over $200 million. As a member of the Tulsa Police Department, Captain Luke Sherman served from 1992 to 2022. He was part of the command staff for the department and has over 2 decades of experience leading, influencing, and guiding hundreds of police officers in their department's employees and enforcement of local, state, and federal laws. Captain Sherman was involved in thousands of critical incidents while working patrol, street crime, SWAT, and leading the department's Fugitive Warrant warrants unit. He also is commander of the department's Special Investigation Division and the Special Response Team. Throughout his decorated career, Luke has been awarded many medals, including the prestigious Medal of Valor. He is a former chairman and current senior director with the National Tactical Officers Association, and he holds a bachelor's in science in criminal justice with a minor in psychology and sociology. And Luke and I met just a few months back. We were both in the same state at the same time at the same event, happened to be there. I was selling books at the event, and I think he was happening to get a feel for and tour Operation Patriot's Fob. Operation Patriot's Fob is a veteran nonprofit organization in South Carolina that, has bunkhouses and ponds and riding trails and a rifle range, a pistol range, skeet ranges, it's a place where if you're a veteran and you register with them, it's completely free to you to go there to get the necessary getaway that you need. And it's a nice little East Coast retreat for veterans right there in South Carolina. So like I said, I'm doing a book signing and I got to meet Mr. Luke Sherman. He came up, he bought a book from me. We chatted about speaking. We chatted about Folds of Honor. And I said, man, we got to have you on and put it out to the community and the greater population, what Folds of Honor is doing and for the veterans and what organizations like that are doing. And so we finally lined it up. We finally got in the studio, and Luke Sherman, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And the connections are always, they're synergistic. And they're just, man, I believe in that. So I felt that move to come over and give you actually a hug and in exchange as brothers in arms and now brothers in peace. But it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. So we'll just get right into it. I want to learn a little bit about your past and your history as an individual, as a person coming up that led you to be, where you are today and giving back. So if you can just kind of start from the beginning of childhood, where'd you grow up, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Man, it's crazy. I am a orphan coming out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So the land of Miller Lite and Harley Davidson. So I adopted in writing a book. And part of that book is one of my chapters is from the ghetto to the suburbs. Man, I was snatched out of the system, shall we say, by my family and moved to a small town, Burlington, Wisconsin, where Tony Romo grew up. So all my younger cousins are friends of Tony Romo in Burlington, Wisconsin, but had the grace to be able to get pulled out of that. Man, I'm a huge opportunity person. So didn't know that then at 6 months old, but man, that's where my life began. I'm a cheesehead. I'm from, the the great state of Wisconsin, which
Yeah.
sometimes can't seem to figure out where it's going, up or down or right or left. But that's where I started. Moved into Oklahoma in '81. My dad works in the paper business and the journalism business. Moved down here. He was actually thinking about becoming an evangelist. Went through, have 6 kids. They're all natural. I'm the adopted one, so big family. Moved to Oklahoma, became a Sooner, or started to become a Sooner, and then moved from there. Went into football and all the things that you do as a kid. Played baseball and football, and that was my aspiration. Started to realize, man, that's really not where I'm going to make it. Nobody's going to make it there, and went to college to be an eye doctor, and bumped into a buddy of mine that is still a dear friend of mine on the police department, and he started to talk to me a little bit, and purpose. And I started to think, do I want to be an ophthalmologist? I'm this weird anomaly. I'm this adopted black kid to a white family that's going to be an ophthalmologist, that's a brain nerd, that loves trigonometry and calculus and can play football. So it didn't really all fit. I was an athlete nerd. And man, my buddy in my first year of college just started pushing on me, and that purpose and that impact started to bleed into my heart a little bit. And you start to realize, I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend that amount of time. So with that being said, I jumped over, went home, told my parents, hey, I'm going to be in law enforcement, and never looked back. It's been a really neat perspective after 30 years, because you get to serve, and you get to do those things that sometimes are difficult, but man, it's neat when the bullets are flying to realize this is my purpose, and this is what I'm going to do from there. On the police department, moved right through it. Promoted in '98, came on in '91, '92, joined SWAT in '95, and really felt the brotherhood there.
Yeah, it's a smaller, more, like more dedicated unit, right? Kind of like a team.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that.
Is that light behind me causing you guys to ask me?
It's just changing the lighting of your camera. It's not bothering me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Like, so, just to slow down a bit, I just want to try to understand a little bit better. So you're adopted at 6 months old.
Yeah.
You're raised in a normal, I don't say normal, but in a normal-esque family. You're playing team sports. You have tons of brothers and sisters, 6 of them. What did your brothers and sisters do? Were there any other law enforcement?
No.
Okay.
Great question. Older brother is a surgeon. Older sister is a school teacher. Younger brother, I could give you birthdays. That's just my natural. Younger brother is an attorney. Took about 6 months of practicing regular attorney stuff and said, I hate it. He does wills and estates. Younger sister is a physical therapist. I'm married to another physical therapist, and then my youngest brother's a neuro nurse. So when we're in Thanksgiving, my mom never raised anybody, didn't do anything else. She was a little Irish, red-haired Irish woman that raised 6 kids, the hellion being me. And then dad was a journalist that he was an evangelist. He had that flair for that, but that never really materialized. But the neat thing my dad was able to do was travel for the Tulsa world and write stories with his buddy who was an evangelist. And so he got to see the world and sort of look at the different focal points of faith and everything around the world, which I drew into because I want to know what makes people different. But it's funny when we sit around a Thanksgiving dinner. I joke and say I'm the dumb one. All the other ones were smart, but what's funny is, Ryan, that the stories are always, hey, Luke, tell us the stories. It's not tell us physical therapy stories or surgeries. Yeah. They wanted to know the story.
So it's interesting to me. I was almost waiting for you to say that your parents were doctors or
No.
in the medical field, but you have a lot of, like, all of your brothers and sisters had something to do with that for the most part. You got a lawyer here and there, but yeah, where do you think that came from?
They were my dad's dad was on the Manhattan Project. So when we got to see Oppenheimer, very smart side there. The outlier or the flyer was the lawyer, but super smart. All 2 or 3 points off perfect on their ACTs.
Did you say your dad's dad was part of the Manhattan Project?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
So as a matter of fact, I took my father to that movie, and he's 80, almost 78, and he brought the actual plaque that his father was presented from the U.S. government
Oh my
for
God.
but it was not the Manhattan Project; it was the Manhattan District. And my grandfather was a supervisor in charge of traveling around with a team of inspectors to ensure that the program as it expanded was, the protocols were in place, and he traveled
Wow.
all over. But very smart family, but blessed. I didn't wrinkle it and put it in there, but my family, my dad was a wrestler. My mom came out of the middle of Wisconsin. Dad was a wrestler out of New Mexico and got 15, 20 scholarships, Lehigh, Penn State, OU, OSU, Ohio State,
Mm-hmm.
and went to Wisconsin. And that's fortunately where they met. They were hippies. It was the 60s. And the way that I came about was in 67, 66. They were out just being hippies in Madtown, Wisconsin, and it was popular. Let's go adopt inner city black kids. And so a group of them loaded up. They traveled from Madtown, which is about 2 hours from Milwaukee, and went to Milwaukee. And basically, were the powder poured on the hand and smacked in the face, and we're told by DHS, no, you don't just show up and pick a black kid.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. So they left, and this is the amazing part of that adopted part is that they had my older brother, they had my older sister, and then the DPS, or DHS, Department of Human Services, came back and said, hey, we have a match for you. And the blessing that I got was, man, they already had a family.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, you know what? We were serious about this. We're growing up as young parents. We're not hippies anymore, which is nothing wrong with hippies. We're not in that college environment. We're young adults, young parents. Let's take a chance. And man, had it not been, I'd probably have been on the other side of the fence from law enforcement.
Could have been. Could have been.
Could have been. Very could.
Yeah,
Very
it's interesting how the influences in our life at a young age really set the trajectory for what our life is going to be like when we're older. Nobody really thinks about that, I don't think. Even when people tell you as a young
Right.
person like what's important and what will be important later, like a lot of people won't listen. But
Right.
that 0 to 12 area of your psychological being
Huge.
formed is enormous. Yeah. And I seen on your bio you were into psychology as your minor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why did you choose that?
I looked at that and I thought, sociology and psychology were. I wanted to be able to say, if I'm going to be a policeman, I want to understand it. I want to try to learn a little bit more. This isn't draconian. It's not thuggery. And I felt like the most rewarding part of being a policeman was when I was a young guy. And now there's all sorts of rewards, but when you were young and I wanted to work in the ghetto, I wanted to work in the worst spots, but it was about the connections. And you could talk to the worst guys out there, but if you had sort of the time to think through why is that guy like that, and you develop that reputation of people thinking, man, I love this guy. He actually, and now if I'm doing something bad, I don't like him, but he's if he stops me, we're rapping. He's not jacking me up and pulling me out of a car and throwing me on the ground, and so I wanted to understand people, and that was probably came from a very early age of trying to understand what makes everybody different. I mean, growing up in Burlington, Wisconsin, and I use this all the time when I speak, the Forrest Gump part of the movie in Forrest Gump where he's on the bus, seats taken. Man, I was one of two black kids in that town. And I'm an American. I don't look at black and white. I don't look at those things. But as a young kid growing up, I do identify with, man, I am different. I'm the only kid in here that looks like me. And man, I got picked last in kickball until I realized he's fast and he actually can play. Then I got picked earlier. But you had to identify that. So I always sort of soul searched with what makes us, why makes us, how makes us, what are we, what makes people tick, and that was my psychology.
No, and that makes sense to me. That's logical. I love psychology myself, and for a lot of the same reasons. I like to try to understand myself a lot of times. Like, why am I the way I am? What made me this way? And then, it really helped me in life in general, understanding, body language, and understanding where people can come from, and understanding that, regardless of the life that I have, there are many, many people that are less fortunate than I am. Of course, there's a lot of people that are far more fortunate than I am too. And so for those same reasons, I've loved psychology. When I went to school, I did, developmental and abnormal psychology classes, when I first came in, and I just kind of fell in love with that stuff. Do you think that, well, let me ask this first. Did you experience any outright like racism as a younger child growing up?
Yes.
And I mean, I mean younger,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years old.
I didn't there.
Like, when's that start?
Yeah, that started for me, fifth and sixth grade.
Okay.
And I kept that. That's a very private side of me that my mom and dad didn't know until I was about 48.
Sure.
But man, I learned to run, fight, and sometimes win. Sometimes negotiate with that element. Sometimes get the better of them in that fight. Sometimes they get the better of you. Multiple adversaries, you're not going to win usually. Learned how to land nav in different ways to get home. And nobody knew that. I kept that from everybody. I kept that from my older brother. I kept that, I'm the protector in the family. So my older brother watched me get my nose ripped off by a kid one day and said, "Hey, let's go home. Let's go home and eat." And I'm thinking, man, my nose broke, buddy. You're my older brother. Where's my knight in shining armor? That's my older brother. That
where's my protection?
Me. Where's my protection, man? And where's the guy that I want to aspire to be? But that started probably fifth and sixth grade. And I hit a lot of that, and that became the pent up frustration of why are you doing this to me? Why? And what's funny about that, Ryan, is there was one other black kid in town, and I would see him occasionally, and he would be looking at me from across the street, and I'd be looking at him, and I'm thinking, I wonder if you're getting that same kind of treatment I'm getting.
Were you guys not friends? Did you guys not talk?
No, we just didn't talk. It was a small enough town. I had my circles. But I remember those days well. And I think that formed, people say it's so unfortunate. And there's a side of our society that wants to talk about the bad, and I'll take the good. And the good was it taught me very quickly to trust your instincts. It taught me to read people quickly, but not to judge people. It taught me that sometimes your adversary is more, has more strength than you, and pick and choose your battles. And that taught me also that there's evil in the world, and there are things that we can't truly understand. You can wrap your mind around trying, or you can move forward and try to figure out solutions. So I'm a glass half full versus a glass half empty person. Bumped into one of those dudes. These were young, aspiring skinheads years later at a gas pump. And I was a policeman, and he was, I don't know what his record was, but I always remember eyes. And I remember seeing some eyes looking at me, and I looked and saw the eyes, and I thought, I know you. And he knew me. And he knew where I was from, and he had probably had an idea where I had gone. And we exchanged a very fragile apology from him, where he actually started to cry a little bit. Nothing major, but he said, "Man, you probably want to kill me." And I said, "Man, I sort of kind of do." But I said, "Man, that's not where we're at." I said, "We were kids." And he goes, "I don't know why we tormented you like we did." But he goes, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And man, that's good. That's good. That's life.
Yeah.
That's where life
well, at
needs
least
to
he
be,
grew.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's just not that. I just didn't have that experience. I grew up in Ohio. There was one black kid in my class. We were great friends. We fished and we hunted, and I'm sure he had other people that were not friends with him. I was raised in a family that didn't see color necessarily, and there just wasn't confronted with anything like that until I went to boot camp. And then once you get to boot camp, everybody's green, and it didn't really matter, right? Yeah. So it just kind of fell into that. And then, as I started interviewing people for my show, I started hearing a lot of things that I was just not, it was not in my world. It was not in my reality. Yeah. And that's tough. And I don't know how to fix necessarily, because like, you're not born racist. And that's why I asked at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, friend, like that's not a thing, but it is a learned, habitually learned thing for kids, which means that's in the house, right? Because I highly doubt that they're hearing it at school from teachers and other role models.
Right.
And for me, it was just like, for so long, I just wanted to say, no, it's not a real thing. This is just something the media does. But the more people I talk to with different stories, it's like, no, and at least when people are growing up, this is a real thing. And you know, people that talked about seeing it in the Marine Corps from senior staff members, or in the Army from senior staff members. And it's like, you know, this is an issue that nobody wants to talk about, especially if you're white. Nobody white wants to talk about this problem, but it's a problem. Like, it's a problem that we need to get past. And you have excelled past it phenomenally, right? But I would imagine that guy would grow up and feel that when he sees you and say, you know how stupid I was when I was 13. You know what I was saying to this kid. You know,
and it's, you know, I've always said that everybody's different. But with the beauty of law enforcement, the beauty of the military, the beauty of team sports, the beauty of those things, where there's a mission and there's purpose, is people begin to identify the person. And I think it's a relief from the psychological perspective, because there's learned behaviors early that were different. But then when, like you're talking about, when you get into boot camp and you're around guys that are different than you and come from different ethnicities, and I mean, it's a blending pot of, and then you realize, no, that guy's this cheese crackers, man. He's amazing. You know, I don't look at him like anything other than he's my brother. And then when you get into critical environments, you know, and a few of the times in my career where you realize, man, that was close. We're getting rounds dumped on us. And you look over and you see my Italian brother and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him behind a bunker, and we're just laughing, and you know, and you're thinking, you know, you're shielded, and you're thinking, this is now I'm not looking at him and thinking, man, he's a guy in green and he's white. I'm looking at him thinking, man, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. This is crazy. You know, this guy's, but I think it's from across the street, they look different. But I've always said, and I believe this, it's in the book, when you cross the street and you engage that person, then you start to get different dimensions of the person versus just what you see. You get the flavor of the person's voice. You get the flavor of the person's their sphere of how they are. You may even get a touch if somebody's gives you, you know. And so that to me is what's lost in America, is we're so, and don't get me started, but we're so focused on it's this or it's that. You know, from a law enforcement perspective, as a commander, there's certain groups within my community that didn't like me because I wouldn't cater to the bullshit. And I'm not going to cater to an environment where you're saying police are doing this just because. No, we're policing behavior. And I need you to help hold certain sections of our community accountable as leaders in the community to holding people accountable for their actions, not necessarily guarding them because of the color of their skin. So people don't like that.
No, yeah, I'm sure. And like it seems like it's I say seems, you know, from the news, it seems way worse than it probably is, but because they try to embroil everything into this massive chaos that, you know, fear monger people. But yeah, I don't know, man. It seems like we have a bunch of people in high positions that are letting criminals go.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know what to do about that. Like, what do you do about a DA who just lets them, like, I like, that's not law and order. You guys can do your job all you want, and if the DA puts him back on the street, I have a friend that works in DC Metro, and they had arrested this guy on gun charges because he's a felon, not allowed to have a gun. They arrested him one day, he was out the next day. They arrested him the next day, he got out the following day, and then 1 week later shot his partner.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's not just one isolated case of a district attorney letting, you know, dangerous people back on the street.
Right.
It's over and over and over and over. And the way he talked about it, he was like, you know, everybody inside my department is scared to death to raise a bullshit flag on corruption because they know they'll get fired and they need their pension, and most of them have years. He's like, me, I got 15 years, man. He's like, 10 more years, I'm done and I have my pension. So what do I do? And I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe you're different than me, because I would do something. I would write an anonymous article. I would find an anonymous reporter. I would find something and do everything in my power to crush that, because, if without law and order, we will descend into chaos, is what you're seeing in this country. When you take law and order away and you infill a bunch of criminals, and I'm not saying that all of the people coming across the southern border are bad people, but when you come across the southern border illegally, you are a criminal now. You are coming and breaking our laws. And a bunch of them are military-age males without other families, and then you start putting criminals back on the street over and over and over when they've been detained. What do you do about that? Like, what's to come of that?
Yeah.
And it's like when I look at California and New York and all these beautiful cities where, main developers and stores and brands are leaving now these places because it's not safe for them, and they're losing money because of lawlessness. And it's like how far do we go? How far do we jump in the casket before we decide that was a bad idea and it's not going to work? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the U.S. is an aircraft carrier, and it takes in our communities. It takes you don't turn an aircraft carrier quickly, and if something falls off, I'm not a Navy guy, but I've got buddies who are, and they say they don't stop it. They send something back to go get it. So it's huge. It's this monstrosity. So you're not going to change it in a moment's notice, but from the perspective of what I would say related to the crime trends and such, sure, if you have a shoplifting mother of four and has an addiction and she's got caught for the third time shoplifting at Target, and she's stealing formula for her first kid or her fourth kid, that's different than if I've got two guys banging it out in downtown Tulsa with street sweepers that are trying to hurt each other, because we have that problem. And a community said, well, Luke, your special operations group's coming down hard on this. And I'm like, we're going to smash this because that group I got guys, with choppers rolling 60, 70 rounds in the middle of a Friday night trying to kill each other. Well, there's collateral damage there. It's called other people. So that's different. I want to lock those dudes up forever. They don't need to be out. If you're trying to murder, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, being an animal.
But if it's animal, let's go. We're hunting, and but man to man, I look at that, and I look at the source of that with that woman that I described, and start to say, let's start to figure out. Let's start maybe spending a little bit of our money instead of going somewhere else and going out of this country. Let's figure out where the source of some of that is. Well, we know it's drug addictions, it's mental illness, and we can start to begin to implement. Now, the problem is you got the government doing that. So, how do we make that effective? How do we create impact that starts to break that cycle with some of those non-violent offenders? I think we've swung from let's take care of non-violent offenders to, well, let's take care of the moderate offenders. Well, let's take care of the so offenders. He hasn't killed anybody. He's just shot a few times. Well, let's, and pretty soon you've got violent people getting out. I mean, one of the worst cases that I had was a sex offender. Man, they're predators. And that dude got out, should have not gotten out. And 2.5 weeks later, we're in the middle of trying to hunt down a guy that we, by the grace of God, figured out who he was. He had a stranger abducted a kid off a playground with her sister, two little Hispanic girls, and the white guy just snatches her off the playground right in front of her sister, shoves her in a car, and away he goes to create mayhem and eventually try to kill her. When I found her with a gentleman from another community. I had a whole group out, and he and I are going through the thickets, and there she is. Ligature around her neck. We had caught him, and by the grace of God, she's alive. So we were minutes away. So that's not a guy you need to have out.
No, he needs to be shot in the head, probably. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a cop.
Yeah, that's the guy that doesn't need to be around.
That needs to stop reproducing. It's a problem. And you know what's
Yes.
sickening is that, you talk about that guy being the problem and he's this predator, but that's way bigger than we know, way bigger than I knew. A multi-billion-dollar institution, an organization that's making billions of dollars off of selling people, slaves of all different colors, mainly underage children. And that, it blows my mind how big of a thing that is across the planet of what I found. And how that's not on the front page of every paper every day in the United States, and not have dedicated people just to hunting these animals down.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
Well, I think I had 8 or 9 units in my last command division. In my human trafficking group, these lieutenants would come in and they'd brief me, on their investigations, and so I spent a lot of my time getting briefed and making micro adjustments, and that unit probably was one of the most dynamic units as far as what they were engaged with. A pure evil.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with hunting predators who are evasive and who would put up, barriers of obstructive resistance to your investigations, but intermingled with the drug world and the trafficking world. But when you start to talk about human trafficking, it doesn't get any more evil than that. Child crimes and human trafficking and taking the weak and exploiting them for money is heading straight south to hell in my mind.
100%. And that's what would be hard for me. Like, I've thought many times about how could I get involved? What could I do? And I don't know that there is anything, but one thing I do know is that I'm the wrong person for that. I know that because of the things that experiences I've had in other countries and different things. That I would give them that ride to that one way place they were going. If I knew what they had done or seen the aftermath of what they were done, I think that I would have I would hope I wouldn't, but I think that I would struggle with self-control of they didn't get your trial's over,
Mm-hmm. Well, those units, Brian, are child crimes, our human trafficking groups, some of those groups such as those. I'm a big fan, and man, I was part of our command staff. I'm a big fan of telling people we have to be really, really, really consciously aware in the psychological thought process of where our people are, because man, they're engaging with a very dark thing. In those investigators of child crimes. In my mind, usually 2 to 3 to 4 years, and got to get them out.
Yeah, that's what my next question was going to be: is how much psychological damage are these investigators and officers experiencing because of the evil that they are dealing with?
Tremendous. A lot of PTS.
Yeah.
And seeing stuff that and probably and I wouldn't want to get into it too much. That's the one thing I really couldn't engage in that much because it bothered me so much. Because you see it, and I knew where I came from, and you see these kids that get lost in the cycle, and before you know it, they just disappear. But my point to that was it's merely the stress that they're engaging in the mind is, I couldn't do anything about this. And now I've been brought aware of 4 years, 6 years, 8 years of horrible abuse. And then we try with it to pull that kid, and then the government, and because it's very, incremental and augmented, then there were times where they would engage and pull a kid, and then next thing you know, the kid goes back into the system over here, and you figure it's probably happening again. So those officers just began to lose faith in their ability to change it. So you can't.
Yeah.
You can't change it.
Not to get too much deeper into it, but Ashton Kutcher is really involved in that. Somebody who is an actor involved in Hollywood, and then kind of falls off of the Hollywood scene. And then I realized that it's because he's going after these people with software and with different stuff. And he addressed Congress last year, or maybe it was at the beginning of this year, about a new tool that he'd come up with and about how serious this is. And he mentioned the foster care service being a cesspool of corruption and maybe the number one place the United States government should start when they want to slow trafficking. Why? With all the oversight and how hard it is to get, like if you want to adopt a child, how hard it is to adopt a child, how does that happen? Is it like what you're saying? They lose them. They just lose track.
Well, well, part of it is this, and I'm not an expert in this, so I wouldn't, and it may have changed, but part of my understanding of it was that, the kids get moved. So so there's a frequency rate, and that's something when you talk to the psychologist on that side, which I love the people working with our foster kids. Like I've got a couple nonprofits that one of them is a company that basically, a small company that basically says we got you, to the kids, but they're also ministering to the families. So you got to start to attack it at the spot where there could be the potential for abuse. And the abuse is if you get kid number one, and kid number one gets moved in 6 or 7 years, 5 or 6 times, how do we tell on those 5 or 6 times where the frequency might have been where he was molested or she was molested? And it's hard to track that. And I think that system has a propensity to move them because they don't want to keep them in the same spot forever. But the kids are getting shuffled around like a bag of groceries. At what point do you not know when a couple apples came out of the bag? And you just don't know. It's still a brown bag of groceries. It just moves along. And it's not talking, it's not communicating. It's just going darker into a hole. And then at some point, when you look in the bag 6, 7 years down the road, you realize half the groceries are gone. Well, those are frequencies of interaction with people along the way. And it's hard to tell. It's not, you can't see it. You can't look through the bag. You don't know what's in there. So there's got to be a better way to intersect with the kids. It's a huge problem. But I think you begin to minister and work with the families and maybe hold more of a tutorial and start to get that. But I'm a huge fan of groups that are going after the foster system.
Yeah. And
this is the first nonprofit that I engaged with that said, we're not ministering as much to the kids, we're ministering to the families. Because if you bring a family in and the family says, hey, we want to be a foster, but then they get the kid and they're like, well, what are we supposed to do with him? He's a 4-year-old. Well, what do they do? I don't know. I don't have kids, they're thinking, and I don't, well, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, that company is saying, hey, take that family and you go over with those 7 families, they're a sounding board. So I can call you, hey, Ryan, man, I just got this 4-year-old and I don't know what to do. Oh, you do this, you do that, you do this.
Almost
okay,
like a sponsor or a mentor. Yeah.
It's and that seems to be working, and that group then becomes cultural and very guarded with different families, and they realize that family over there is not really engaging. Maybe there's some issues and the kids acting up. Now they have a different way to start to see behind the curtain and see if maybe that family, plus there's money involved.
Yeah.
There's money involved, so yeah, where the money is usually where the corruption begins to happen. So, yeah, but Kutcher's good stuff. I think the human trafficking side is scarier than people think. The stuff coming across the border. There's when you see a lot of these people coming across. I heard that on the Sean Ryan show, but they're coming across the border in a certain section. Yeah. The younger girls are not. Well, that's because the cartel wants to double down and make more money selling them. So I don't know if that's true or not. I'm hearing that, but it would not surprise me if there's money to be made.
Oh, no doubt.
Those idiots, they would do it.
No doubt. I've looked into some of the cartel, and they got like tier systems. You have this much money, we'll take you through the okay path, and you might get caught and you might get raped on the way or whatever. You got this much money, we're going to take you through, a little bit more secure of a path. And probably the coyotes, if there's women, they're still going to get hurt and abused. And then you have people like, let's say Al-Qaeda or ISIS or the Taliban who have insurmountable amount of, they have a great amount of money that they could do. And they're like, we want to infiltrate. And then maybe you go through tunnels and you get guided and and so there's different levels of this, and the cartel is making their money all the way along the way. And then part of me wonders if they're not paying some people to come over. Who knows? So, I hope that we get that figured out. And because look, I have nothing against the Mexican people, Guatemalan, anybody from south of the border. And if you're running from oppression, give me your weak, give me your weary. But you got to do it the right way. Yeah. And for the biggest reasons is A, for safety. Okay. For safety. But B, like every single immigrant that naturalized the right way and stood in line and did the tests, all the government is doing by not stopping this flow is slapping every one of them in the face and saying, yeah, it didn't really matter. You should just come this way. You're going to get the same thing out of it. And that to me is an issue. And I think it's an issue to most Americans, let's be honest. It's among the top things that voters in this next, election are looking at. So,
well, you buy a house. You just mentioned you bought a house. I buy a house. My house isn't open to the public. It's my house. You work to get certain things. That's what this country is about. Mm-hmm. And people have always said, well, have you, as a black guy growing up, and I'm like, I'm an American. I'm not a big fan of the African Americans. I understand, the ethnicity, but I've challenged a lot of times people with Africa, and well, the country of Africa, no, it's an actual continent. It's a continent, and there's a bunch of countries there, but be proud of America first, seek to understand your ethnicity and where you came from second. But I go back to it. It's my house. You don't have the option to come in and just hang out in my living room just because you feel like, it was cold outside and you were oppressed outside. I love the idea of people coming here, but you got to do it the right way. You got to go through the process. It may not be easy, but I think it completely waters down the value of this country. And the safety. I mean, you guys provided our freedom. First responders provide our safety. Those are two things that are critical, and you are 100% correct. Americans, even though they would say they want people here, do you really? Without unaccounted for? Do you really want to bring 10,000 people in and you don't know who's who and what's what? And it's all fun and games until somebody in that group then violates something close to you, and then all of a sudden you're like, we got to make a difference.
I
think it's real clear.
No, go ahead.
It's real clear. I mean, I saw it in Israel just recently. When the borders are compromised and there's not the ability to have a lawful way of doing things in a process, we saw what happened.
Carnage.
There's carnage, and it's lawlessness, and people get hurt, and things are created and actions are made that will never allow people to come back the same way. That has forever changed the face of that relationship
100%
with the Israelites and the Palestinians, and probably more branching out from there.
Yeah, it's scary. And that's another thing that like your college student liberal American isn't thinking about is like, look outside. Like, look outside this country and look at the globe as we know it right now. It is tilting further into chaos every single day. And you just want to love everybody, just want to let everybody in, just love everybody, and it doesn't matter. You will reap that. You will reap the consequences of those actions, and they don't know that. They just don't know. And people that have, like yourself, that have seen the streets and seen evil for what evil is, and people like myself and Matt and anybody else that went over and seen evil for what evil was, you come back with a level of awareness. And the American people, they haven't been hit in a while. There's a bit of complacency. And God knows I do not want to get hit. I love this country, but it is time to wake up before everything around us starts folding,
Right.
That's just my angle on it. And it's not a political angle. It's just like, hey, the state of the world, and let's be cautious and, cautiously skeptical about the things we see and hear. But let's get past that. I didn't mean to deep dive into that too much, but I felt like it was almost necessary.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff.
I'm loving it on this side.
Yeah. So, talk about your professional career that led you to be where you are now. You've already talked about, being a police officer and working that side of things. How do you end up at Folds of Honor, working for an organization that's helping Gold Star families?
So you realize that it was the right move being in law enforcement and going through the special operations side and being in SWAT and being on the, people say the tip of the spear, but engaging in that environment, I began to understand that there's the critical moments. But then there's the moments after the critical moments that are so significantly longer. Obviously, I mean, the book. You guys had that moment, those moments. But then it's the legacy of life after that I began to sort of understand. And I'm a big book reader. and I'm sort of nerdy like that. I want to know if there's an issue. If I see something, I'll research it. I'll start to read, and I want to know the angles to it. Um, you send me a text, it's one dimensional. I read a book, it's multidimensional. I talk to you, it's very multidimensional. There's much more to it. There's much more dimensions, and I like that. And so as I went through my career, I began to realize that there was more to it than just a career. It was the ripple effect, as I call it. When you touch the water, hey, that's great. That might be an incident, that might be an arrest, that might be a big investigation. But what happens after that? And I always sort of wondered what happens to the families. I always thought when we take a bad guy out of a house that's a notoriously bad guy, and he has two younger brothers, excuse me, and they're off to the side looking at us, we're creating, yeah, he's arrested for homicide and two shootings and two guns that we get him with, but those brothers are now the battlefield of where we're going to go. If we treat him with respect and engage them, and where I'm going with that, Ryan, is, or are we going to see them? And most likely, most often in our line of work, well, we're justified. We're arresting him. We're talking stern to those two. Those two will be playing with us in about 2 or 3 years. And they have rage because of what we've done to their brother, even though they don't understand it.
Right.
The same thing applies with critical incidents where we lose somebody. And I remember, and the story to me was I engaged with Colonel Dan Rooney, many years ago. I've got my own security company, and we came in together, and he hired me to do some security for them and to provide security at the Patriot Cup as they were starting to ramp up. So I brought in a group to do that, and we formed a friendship there. Fast forward to 2022, that was 2014, 2012. 2022, he engaged me. We go back and forth, and he engaged me to ask for my advice and counsel to expand. He was looking to expand from the military into the first responder and bring in that family, which is a touchy subject for some folks. But we looked at it and thought, and I had told him this many years ago. I said, hey, brother, we spill blood. It's just in different mud. You take care of me and give me freedom. I'm taking care of you and giving you safety here. And it wasn't, we were challenging either side. We were just looking and saying they're parallel lanes. These are American heroes cruising along, putting their business on the line, saving each other, dragging people out of the firefight, but not comparing what the military does to our law enforcement or firefighters, but similar roles of, I'm putting my life in service for my country.
100%. A lot of people might want to split hairs about that, but it's the same people. Archetypically, those are the same people, and a lot of times they come 1%. Off the battlefield and go into that profession. Right. I mean, dude. I don't see it differently.
Right.
I don't see it. Without one, you're not going to have the other anyway.
Right. And so that began the process. And I had 30 years, and I joked with him, we're friends, and I said, why don't I just retire and come work for you? And it made sense, but a couple of years before that, and I think I might have told you, I just 4 Class A funerals, a couple, and this is another one I'll get into, but and those were people that died in the line of duty that were close, but then you had suicides as well. So and I look at those situations and I say, okay, we're all in our Class A's. I've got my captain's hat with the goofy stuff on the top of it, and everybody gets there, and it's all prim and proper, and we're giving respect as we should to that family and that individual who we lost. But I've always thought different. I've always thought, okay, what happens 2 hours after we all leave? What happens the next day for her and those 3 kids? Who's got their back? Where are they supposed to go? I can't imagine if I lost my wife, and I had to look at my 4 kids and say, okay, where are we going without her?
Yeah,
she's, and I didn't really get that, but I'm a bike rider. I'm a mountain bike rider. And to clear my head, I'd put my headphones on, my AirPods, and I'd ride around downtown Tulsa on Sundays before the week of work. Purely spiritual. Just want to ride. I want to look at everything. And it's a cool downtown. There's some vibrant stuff. I remember stopping at this outdoor theater and watching these girls. There was like 6 or 7 girls doing this theater kind of dance. I couldn't hear them because I had but it was just to see life and feel life. And I rode around, And I stopped one day, and this was three or 4 years before the folds. And I stopped on this against a building of a buddy of mine that owns this building, and there's a plaque. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me. And it's a plaque in honor of one of my friends. He was older than me on the apartment that was shot in that alley. Then gentrification, one of the buildings was gone. So it was a parking lot, but it was the alley where Dick was shot and killed by an armed robber. And they had to go down the alley. He's a canine officer. And the guys that heroes of mine went toe to toe with the devil. His dog was over him. He had been shot and ambushed from the side looking. He's a canine. And they went toe to toe and dispatched this turd, but they had to figure out how to get the dog off of him. And he was mortally wounded, and he ended up passing away. But that was a plaque to Dick. And so that was the end of my ride every Sunday, was come to the plaque, touch the plaque, say, I love you, brother. But I always thought, and then it dawned on me, where the heck and what the heck? That was 1996, 97. What happened to his family? You know, we honored him with pride. I mean, they brought the dog in to the funeral. The dog went down to the casket. Honor guard guys, like military, we learned that from you all. They're completely haven't moved in 2 hours. And the casket's there. All the SWAT guys are there. We're all class 8 up, and his family comes in last. Reverent moment. I get it. I love it. That's what we should do. It's our final piece to our brother. And then they brought in his partner. That dog came down to that casket and started whimpering, circled that casket, could probably smell him. In a way, he'd probably been embalmed, but still could smell parts of him. Circled, put his paw, like pawed at the casket. And that's a memory I'm telling you about. So when I saw that plaque, I thought, it was so poignant to me back then. Where's it at now? And that's sort of the iteration of pushing me in that direction of having that in my mind. Then fortuitously through God and those things that just sort of align up, I bump into Dan, and Dan said, hey, let's talk about this expansion. And I thought, let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's just go. Let's go. And that's where I'm at. That's how it happened.
And now you're here. Oh man, got me in my feels with that. I've seen the pictures of that actually.
Yeah. The dog deal hurt a lot. Because you realize, man, we're not messing around. Even this dog gets it. And you know, I wondered to this day, you know, what happened to that mama and that family.
Yeah.
You know, and Americans don't. You two do, you know, because you buried brothers. But people don't understand that. And I think that's the side of me, that my psychologist side, you know, that psychology side where in my mind is, I want to get into a room with a bunch of people and talk about it and say, okay, let's start hammering on these issues. Let's seek to understand each other's minds and why we're where we are at. But heroes bury our brothers and sisters, but the public doesn't know. You know, the public doesn't know where we go and what we do and how we do it. So that sort of gets you to how I got to the folds. My military backside, I'm not military, but that side of me was that NTOA was this integration of those two groups. You know, where I did do some training in Jordan. I did do some training with some Air Force PJs and some of the other groups and some forward groups with the Air Force and all the acronyms. It's hard for me to understand them unless you're in them.
Us too.
Yeah. But you sort of kind of see the similarities at a younger age, and I started to mature into, man, these are just my brothers in different uniforms.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, doing what we can for this country. So
can you talk a little bit about, unless you're living under a rock, you probably know what Folds of Honor does, but for those people that do live under a rock and have internet service to watch this, explain, give them your 5-minute pitch on what Folds of Honor does, who it takes care of, how it does that, and let them know. I'll
do my best to tell the front side of the story, and then I'll cruise through it. Dan is an Air Force pilot, and I think 3 combat tours, and he's coming back to Michigan. He's got 2 home spots, and the pilot of the plane basically says, hey, everybody, if you'll just hold before you get off the plane, they're up in Michigan. and he notices this a Marine in Class A's. His battle. I don't know how they call it. Class A's or battle dress or his finest.
Mm-hmm.
And then he realizes this guy is bringing back the remains of his brother.
Mm-hmm.
His brother, not a brother, but his actual blood brother. And Dan's watching this thing, and he looks out, and you can see them, unloading the casket and draping the flag, and Dan looks around and realizes half the plane's deboarded. People in a hurry to get home, but don't have the decency to wait for somebody who did what they did, and that family. And that's where I'm at. The guy did his service, but man, his family is in the darkest moment of their life, trying to come out of this thing, and they're just receiving the remains that have come back. I can't imagine. I got 2 sons. I got 4 blended. I cannot imagine as a father with one of my sons waiting for the remains of my other one. And it would be rage if I knew that people didn't want to wait.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. And so Dan forms in 2007 and forms in a garage in Broken Arrow, just down the road from our office, to begin to say, okay, how can I carry this? These are soldiers, these are heroes. Let's carry their legacy. Well, the legacy of us is our children.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts to move this thing forward by saying, how can I carry momentum? How can I reestablish momentum initiative to say, let's go? And that begins the journey of the folds. And our numbers are different now. 51,000 scholarships, $240 million
Wow.
push toward those kiddos and spouses. So if a dude gets wiped out and his spouse says, I've got to reacquire, focus and target on something new, we'll help that spouse as well with scholarships and those gold stars. And they push them through tutoring and through counseling and through some of the things such as like trade schools. It's not just higher education where a guy's got to be a doctor. If it's a kid that says, you know what, my dad just got wiped out and I want to be a welder, they apply and they begin to go through that process. And the Folds provides monies from American companies and philanthropics to put that money into. We won't hand it to the families. We say, okay, Luke, you got 2 kids. Those kids are going to Dartmouth and one's going to trade school. Show us the information. There's an application process, and the money, when they're awarded, goes toward helping pay $5,000 a year toward those kids. You can't pay for the whole thing. But if a kid's a legacy kid and he comes through 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, man, that helps a ton for that mama or that daddy who's by themselves.
Yeah.
To say my child had 5 years of the Folds recipient scholarships, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I can actually speak to a couple of my friends that actually use the Folds, qualified for the Folds, and their kids go to like a private school, not necessarily private, but it's a Montessori. It's just a little bit different, than the public school system. Their tactics and stuff are different, and it's just made a world of difference for those particular couple of families to be able to get that scholarship to help towards getting their kids that better education, or just a more maybe convenient to them, whatever it is, it's helping them with that, but financially and psychologically. So I've been seeing you guys doing work, and Dave, and been watching the commercials and donating. What you guys do over there is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't be on board enough with that company and with that system, and with everybody that like yourself that is a part of that engine, making that work, making that run, because I know that stuff's not easy. And what I do love about it is that it is coming from American companies out of the generosity of their heart, the patriotism, nationalistic pride that swells to say, yep, I agree with that story, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and help these people. It's amazing.
Yes, it's tough when you have that amount of money, and you've got we have a staff, but we're proud to say, and we're hovering right in between 91 cents and 90 cents on the dollar. Out of that $240 million has gone toward families. And I think, I'm a proof in the pudding person. If I'm going to give you $10, I want to know, where's that $10 going? I don't need to know if it's going into a Ferrari or a vacation for a staff member. I need to know where it's going. And so that's a big one for me when I'm talking to the bigger businesses that I go to. And a Harley or I mean, some of our partners, Coke and Yeti and Delta and Frontier and Southwest and Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch, and you go right down the list of the big companies, and they're there, and there's some big energy companies as well. But that's the big question, a CEO is going to hit you with is, if I'm looking at engaging you in this because I've got, I'm an energy company in Oklahoma that's got a ton of veterans. Cool story about them. 40 some years in the business, they never had an American flag. So this CEO, who's a friend of mine, said, I want to put an American flag up in front of our building. And he said, that's the least I can do for the 400 some veterans that work here. And the swell of pride came back into that company.
Wow.
Because the veterans said, oh, hell yeah. I spill blood for that thing, and this guy is not a veteran, but he has pride in our country.
Yeah.
Where certain people would be like, don't do that, it's unpopular. Now,
yeah.
Leave. You can leave the country. We still fly red, white, and blue here. But,
that's right.
But I think it's it's been tough. There's been some journey, but we're starting to move fast. There's 32 chapters, so those chapters are spread around. When I met you, I had basically, we're flirting with some stuff in that area, but it was one of those situations where I was engaged to come see OpFob, and that's sort of a different wrinkle for me. But we were dealing with Daniel Defense. Daniel Defense was working with us to try to provide some funds, and I told Joe, I said, hey, let's just go. Where are you going? And he goes, I'm going to this deal, OpFob, and I said, what is it? So my wife and I flew down there and got a chance to come out and just hang out with American heroes. People would say, well, what are you going down there for? Man, nothing other than to give, a little bit of swag and just let people know, let our heroes know there's resources out there. Big one that we haven't touched on yet that I hope eventually the fold starts to engage with is maybe getting philanthropics to begin to provide counseling. Obviously through anonymity, and when working with some of the bigger companies or some of the bigger, more trustworthy groups to provide counseling and the military knows it. The military's been doing it for a while, at least in certain regards, but law enforcement and our firefighters and our paramedics are in a war zone too. Yeah. It's just a different one. And they do need to have I've lost more police officers in my career on my job to suicide than to being engaged by bad guys.
Yeah, same for me. I've lost more people out of country than in.
Yeah. So
most veterans that I talk to say the same thing. It's a sad reality.
And nobody cares. We do, but the public doesn't care. They're just, well, you guys went, and I heard it on Saturday said, you guys went to war and came back, and it's just, well, whatever, man. That's just part of. No, it's not. That's not. If they went to war and they came back, and then we owe them a debt of gratitude. In my mind, we're indebted to that person for the rest of their lives. That's the way I look at it. You serve me, and if a person comes back, and the person's trying to wrap their mind around, they had 3 really close friends, and they're gone in a moment, man, we owe them. We don't need to forget that and walk away from that. So I think the same applies. I shouldn't say nobody cares. There's a lot of Americans that don't care. There's a ton of us that do, and I'm going to make a lot of noise about it. And if people don't like it, that's fine. You're not going to make my coffee taste any different.
Yeah.
If you tell me you don't like me, I don't really care. I'm 53. Lived 2/3 of my life. The last third, I'll live it unapologetically as a proud person that served his country in a certain way, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But that's what the company does. It's committed to our page. We do stuff like $13 every month. The 13 is significant for us because it's the folded flag. And people say, well, that's a bad number. And I said, no, that's a hallowed number.
Yeah.
When we fold that flag with 13 folds, and bring a soldier home or put a firefighter to rest and hand that flag that 13 folds had, and people don't know that, right? People don't know that the folded flag has 13 folds and they have symbolic issue and reason. It came from the military, and they didn't just make it up. And I think when people start to get that, they start to understand there's dynamic here. Yes, we'll bury that person with honor and pride, but the mission is moving forward with the family and carrying the legacy so we don't lose momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's beautifully put. I'm not even gonna add to it. That's right where how it should be. Well,
Yeah.
what have I not talked to you about that you wanted to talk about?
Uh, you know, it's interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's, coming from the first responder side, the numbers are staggering. Our
100%.
military, and by the way, thank you for what you two have done for me and for my family to keep us safe. By the
No.
way, I'm cruising through your book, and
Hope you like it.
I do, I have to stop at times and put it down because I want to process it. I don't just
Mm-hmm.
want to read a book, say I read a book.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read it and sort of feel it and process. And so I'm cruising through it. But
Love it.
thank you for that. But it's even on the home front here, over 2 million first responders.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
people
what people need to
realize that.
realize is that the first responder
Mhm.
community is 4 times what the military is minimum. I know those are old numbers, but it's 4 times the amount of PTS and even TBI issues from accidents and explosions for firefighters inside. My grandfather was a firefighter, and he got blown out
Yeah.
of a house by a propane tank going off, and he would laugh about it and strike another cigarette up and tell a story, but the amount of damage that probably did to his brain, I don't know. That's a pretty concussive blow, and to get blown out of a building. And, I
Right.
got, I've been have struggling with brain issues myself, and a lot of my guys that, were downrange with us. And those kind of injuries are happening all the time in America. And not to mention the moral and psychological issues that come to firefighters and first responders, highway patrol and sheriffs, constables, all the same when they're going in and helping Americans that have been in car accidents and helping Americans that have had tragedy strike, and they have to go in there and they have to see that, just like your guys work in trafficking. You have to go and
Right.
contend with evil too in America, and we can't forget those people, because without a nation of laws and law and order, we will descend into chaos, as
Mhm.
we said earlier. And so we got to.
Yeah.
I love that you guys are helping them as well.
2 million. Um, I'll give you their numbers. There's 800,000 gun toters. I call them hose draggers. There's 1.3 million hose draggers. Here's a startling thing about firefighters, and I love my firefighters. Um, 800,000 of the 1.3 are volunteers, but they're dying too. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a banker, or you have a shop owner in California that says, you know what, the Santa Ana fire, the winds constantly are here. I'm gonna learn to be a firefighter volunteer, and I'm gonna help my community. Well, the fire
Mm-hmm.
doesn't discriminate.
Right.
Um, and they're getting wiped out too. And then you've got, hundreds of thousands, several 100,000 paramedics and EMTs. I'll give you the frequencies: 240 million calls a year, 911, trouble unknowns and situations. 660,000 calls a day
Mm-hmm.
is what our American first responders are engaging with, which a ton of those are violent, unknown environments. So, like you're saying, they handle it. It's their job. They're built to do it. But the generations coming into this are getting indoctrinated and just absolutely washed with, man, I'm a brand new kid, and man, what is this stress that I'm dealing with every day?
Mm-hmm.
And Americans just expect it to just be normal because that's the way a lot of Americans are. They don't see it, won't be it, don't experience it, don't care about it.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Um, Out of sight, out of mind. But 660,000 calls since we've been on this call.
Yeah.
How many? We broke down one over an hour. Well, divide that by 660 by 24. It's a ton. And military members are still going through things. They're still coming back, and there's still stuff happening. 3 Marines killed, in a training accident a couple months ago. But I even go past just the activations and on point. We've got a ton of brothers and sisters coming home. We can't forget that. You can't just say, hey, thank you for your service. I don't like that word.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you why. I've got a dear friend who's in an airport, and somebody came up to him. He's trying to process and come back, and he's traveling somewhere. He's been over in the theater, the war theater, where he's seen his brothers and sisters killed. And somebody comes up who's an unknown. I get it. thank you for doing that, whoever that person was, but they say, thank you for your service. And he turns and he's talking to me. He's reliving the moment. And he says, that just took me back to the last 2 weeks before I left. And I watched one of my brothers get killed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes, I understand why the civilian did it, but he goes, it brought me back to the trauma. So when I see a service member in an airport, and I love them, I'll come up and say, welcome home. Because to me, man, home is Thanksgiving. Home's pumpkin pie. Home's where you're at, where I'm at. If we're enjoying each other's fellowship and in the holidays or 4th of July, that's home. So I get it. I'm telling that brother or sister, I love you. I know who you are. And I'll tell that to service members as far as first responders too. I will come up and say, thank you for what you're doing and keeping us safe. But welcome home is what I tell service members in the airport, because
Sure. And I have a bit of a different take on that, and it's not to take away from that service member that had trouble.
Right.
If you're a service member that's struggling and you're just coming home and it was saucy, man, you're going to be in a different spot, and you're going to look at things from a different perspective and a much fresher perspective. But I would say this. I would say that civilian and the amount of courage that person had to muster to come up to a complete unknown stranger and then thank him for something that they have no clue about. They have no clue. Right. I've heard guys say, you don't thank me, you're thanking me. You don't even know what you're thanking me. You don't know what I had to do. But it's like, what are you thanking me for? I got buddies that died over there. And it's like, so who do they thank then? Who do they pass on their gratitude to?
Great point.
For your buddy that's dead, because they can't tell him. They don't know him. They've never seen him. And here you are as a representative and an ambassador of your service. And this person, be it that they're a little old lady or that they're, 15, 16-year-old kid that aspires to go do that one day, had to possess the courage to come up to you and say, I know nothing about what you did, but thank you for.
Yeah. I track with you. I think that's really solid, sage perspective on it for being there. And that is there's another dimension, like we talked about before, where, man, it's a dimension of somebody saying that and coming up to a person and doing that. And I would say, publicly to anybody in the continental United States, don't forget them.
I guess that's what I'm saying. That's their way, their 100%. Only way that they know of to say that. Like, who do you say it to? Who do you say thank you to if it's not the people, coming home? So got a little emotional there, but
no, I love it. And that's and I will apply that. Maybe I'll make my adjustment.
I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying the amount of courage that it takes for a civilian to not understand that and to say, to have that, to say thank you. And as Marines and soldiers and sailors, it's a laughing, like that's a brunt of a joke a lot of times. Hey, thank you for your service,
Yeah.
But that's between us. And for somebody to actually say that, I talk about purpose a lot, and like the purpose I got from giving to complete strangers, that I'll never meet, that I'll never see, that'll never know me. That's part of that. And so when somebody comes up that you don't know and says, thank you, that's the way I feel it. No, you thank me, but you're thanking him and him and him, so. Yeah. So that's what I would say to service members.
And it's really good. That's a solid piece, because you are 100% correct. When I'm talking to my buddy, man, he was raw.
Well, and he was in a place where he was fresh and it was hurting, and he wasn't in a position to look at that comment or that gratitude from the right space. And that's what I was saying. When you're first home, man, when I was first home, if somebody told me thank you, I don't know what I would have done. Thank you for your service. I would hope that I'd say, yeah, you're welcome. That's what I would hope that I would do. But if I'm home and I'm sitting in the airport and the only thing I'm thinking about is the last images I saw of my friends, and then somebody says thank you, yeah, you could be in a bad spot and just be like, now I'm all I'm thinking about it. I understand that. Yeah. I still think you need to say thank you. If that's what you feel like you're possessed to do, and you have that inclination, you need to do it. Yeah.
You can't do it. And if it's and I've always said this to my two sons, engage in the conversation. And if it's taken the wrong way or misconstrued, or your intent is always what matters.
Right.
You did try to reach out, and I've always told that to him. I said, if you're trying to talk to your brother about something and he snaps at you, be good with it. It's the spiritual thing. Give exercise forgiveness. Hey, I tried to reach you on that, but I get it. And
absolutely. And if you're that veteran sitting there and you hear that, before you make that knee jerk reaction, and just be like, "What? You don't even know what you're talking about," or "Can you believe this guy?" or whatever. Think about, everybody's going through shit. First of all, they don't know what you're going through. They have no clue what your job was, but you are the ambassador of something that they hold high, something that they know they need to say thank you for. And if it's your buddy, say thank you. I'll pass that on. And that try to do that, and then you can have your meltdown later. Because if you snap on that person, that is going to completely distort the image that person had of that service and of that gratitude and of that for the rest of their life. Maybe they never say thank you again for somebody, even though they're thankful for it. And being an ambassador of your service, you need to be an ambassador of your service, not an ambassador of yourself.
I saw that in a restaurant just this week, and there's 4 officers, and we were sitting off to the side, my wife and I, and a big table, and a lot of people in this restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, and the gentleman, the 2 young guys are walking by, uniforms, heading back to their table. And the gentleman stops what he's saying at the table and says, "Hey, thank you for your service," and reaches out a hand to grab. And the officer sort of reaches out and grabs it and just sort of keeps, and just keeps going. The entire place watched it. Mm-hmm. And I turned to my wife, and we're sitting on the same side of the bench. And I said, "Man, look at that." I said, "Man, he didn't even take the time to stop, look the guy in the eye, and say thank you,
and acknowledge that." Yeah.
And you could tell that the table was like, "Oh, did we say something wrong here? Did we interject?" And it was disappointing to me. There was young and old officers. This was a young officer, but it was almost like he was embarrassed a little bit. And I've done that. People have seen me on the First 48, which is the show, and people have seen me in the airport and stuff, and will come up and say, "You got to take the time." And I'm in a different spot, so I can say thank you very much for saying that to me. But
if I look at it from the young officer's perspective, at this time in America, you're selflessly going out to protect your community, and everybody shits on you.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
So you're gonna be in that almost that defensive,
defensive.
Are you trying to do something you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, you should probably acknowledge those people and understand, something that we would say is in a coin operation. If I shit on the community and I don't, and I don't interact and I don't go out there and I don't get with them, they will be turned against me. If I go out and I do something bad to them and others see it, they will be turned against me in a coin environment overseas. You're doing the same thing in Chicago. You go out and treat people like a strong arm them, and there's people who don't care and that will come after you. You can make it a more dangerous place. And I'm not necessarily saying that, but if you want your atmospherics to be positive in your community, you should go about that a different way, for those young officers.
It's like those 2 brothers I talked about early. We snatch and grab Big Brother for a crime and pull him out of a house. There's a vacuum.
Yep.
In I didn't have that vacuum, but we had a community outreach group, and I'd say, that's your job. Go in and mend a little bit. We just destroyed and wiped out the guy, because that's my job, is to go out and find him and deal a blow on him and yank him. But I said, we're missing the point if we don't try to interface with that family in some capacity, because it's a vacuum we're creating. So I love it. 100%. Well, it's been an honor. The Folds is cruising forward. It's a blessing to work there, and we're touching hearts and minds. I think this year we gave out somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,500 scholarships just went out, and I think we awarded 9,500 of those so far. There's a ton of money involved in that, but it's neat to see some of the stories of some of the kids, and we've got a whole group that follows the journeys. Where are they now? It's type stuff, and it's neat to see some of the kids starting to get through college and and coming out into the professional world and coming back as speakers that have the ability to say, man, my dad got wiped out. He was an Air Force guy in a training environment, and I was 12 years old, and now I'm a college graduate and going to med school. That's good. Beautiful. That's good stuff. So
America is the light.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you being on. Luke Sherman, everybody. Choices Not Chances podcast. Share it out. Get this information out to the people that need to hear it. And if you're a Gold Star, Blue Star family, first responder family, and you need help, reach out to me. Reach out to Luke. We'll put the information up there, and let's get the help that you need. Next time, till choices not chances. Till next time, guys. This is Ryan and Matt.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger, we have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.